and they tell you you're ready, but they never say you got everything you need. Now go fight a war.
Right.
You're never by yourself. You always have somebody there.
Welcome to Stars of Service. I'm Brian Christensen. If you've served, you know what it's like to carry that weight wherever you were, wherever you happened to serve, and something didn't go right. And if the worst thing happened where lives lost, and you're you're gonna feel that the rest of your life. I am talking with Michael Nussbaum, who's actually a podcaster. I met him on an assignment in Salisbury, North Carolina, and he got out and started a podcast for veterans. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
Okay, so talk a little bit about your service. What did you do? You were in the Army, right?
Correct. So I was in the United States Army. I was a demolitions and explosives combat engineer and did that for many years and had a great career and retired from the United States Army and led me into another journey, if you will. So the journey from Iraq and my tours and overseas back to another journey. And that was my journey to normalcy, if you will, or somewhat normalcy.
What so what do you mean by the journey though? I mean, that's how
So
long of a journey is it?
it's for the rest of your life, right? So when you become a soldier or an airman or a marine or a sailor, and you join the military, you become part of an elite, neat club, if you will, and that club is a 1% club. 1% not meaning anything bad, but a 1% of the people that actually serve their country. And we have a special and unique set of ideas and what we do. And coming home from combat, especially either Iraq or Afghanistan or deployments, is really unique in itself because you don't always take off the uniform, which is inside of you, because that's what's instilled. You become part of that uniform. That uniform becomes part of you. It might not be your identity for the rest of your life, but it is a huge part of you, especially when you're young. So coming home, it was a journey for me to normalcy. 120 miles an hour, used to gunfire and mortars and always being attacked in Afghanistan to be in some sense of normalcy, not carrying a gun anymore, not wearing a uniform, having to actually pick out your clothes when you wake up. It's a totally different process, the way you think, the way you see things. And trying to get back to that normalcy is a long journey. And sometimes it takes the rest of your life.
You were talking about picking out clothes and everything, and that's first world problems. I'm going to use this right now. Talk about the journey this past weekend. This past weekend, we invaded Iran, um, and I'm not going to go politics wise. We're talking facts. We're not choosing sides or whatever else. Talk about that journey that you may have had a normal day. I know I didn't. I know that on Saturday, I was driving back from Nashville and I felt different. I felt like, wait, I have had these feelings before. It's a dark cloud that just doesn't go away. And I couldn't figure out why. And I'm like, oh, wait, of what's going on in the Middle East right now.
It is. We obviously spent a lot of time in the Middle East, you as well, and we got to know each other, you and I, especially before this broadcast and recording. But it was a different. It's a different feeling for the veterans. It really is. It brings you back to a place that you had long hoped to forget.
Right.
And I think that's one of the hardest things is, we talked again, you and I, and um, those of us who are old enough to remember the 1970s and the gas crisis and Iran hostages that were kept hostage for over years and weren't released until new president, President Reagan came in, then they were released. It's something that we didn't understand back then, but then when we serve in the Middle East,
Right.
especially that close to Iran, and we were on the actual border of Iran during the Iraq War, it kind of takes you back to that place that you had hoped that you would forget, hoped that you had put away and locked away in a Pandora's box and set aside.
Right. Yeah. After watching just a little bit of footage, excuse me, and I was thinking about, just some of the time that I was in Afghanistan, and it really it did a number on me. I had to go out for a 5 mile run. I just ran until I couldn't run anymore, and I just realized how much of well, you said it best. This journey, it keeps going, but you have got to put one foot in front of the other to in order to win past it and everything. So I want to know
Hey,
though, how did you in your journey? How did you get from what was it, munitions depot
demolitions
demolitions?
explosives.
How'd you go from that to podcaster?
So one of the things that I learned when I came home from Iraq, I became one of the unfortunate homeless veterans. I came home to both my parents were deceased, had passed away while I was deployed in
So sorry.
Iraq, and was newly divorced. So I came home to really nothing. I had nothing, no family. And I noticed that when I talk to other veterans and everybody says, "Oh my gosh, you were homeless. That's so horrible." Wasn't that bad. It was in Miami, Florida. So the sun was shining and we had some good weather, thank goodness. But nonetheless, when I talked to veterans that were Vietnam veterans, I noticed that they almost had a healing in their eyes. It was a connection that I couldn't have with anybody in my family, anybody that I met on the street, or any counselor or psychiatrist or anything. It was a connection that was different. So I kind of put that to my own healing process and share a great story with you. I was at a VA one day and there was a gentleman there. He was a double amputee. He was waiting to go in to see the therapist. And I was outside and I looked over at him and I said, "Hey, how are you?" He nodded his head and I said, "You served in Fallujah." And he looked back at me and said, "How do you know?" And I said, "I saw your bag on the back of your wheelchair." And I said, "I was attached to them with the 1st Infantry Division." And we started talking. He went inside to his therapist. His therapist then came out and said, "What did you say to him?" And I just struck up a conversation. We had a commonality. We were at the same place, same time, same sand table. And she said, "He has never really opened up." And that's the most I've ever heard him talk in the 5 months that he's been coming to me. So I knew that not a gift, because I hate saying a gift, but I
Right.
knew that that was my healing because I know that the more I talk to other veterans about my experience and listen to them, that it healed and helped me deal with my inner PTSD, my inner things that I was going through. So if I could help just that one veteran, imagine if I could put that on a video and broadcast it to Roku television, which we're on Roku television. My show is on Spotify, on different platforms. But if I could take that one veteran and let them know that when you join the military, as well as the Air Force or Navy, they issue you underwear, socks, t-shirts, uniforms, boots, and they tell you you're ready. But they never say you got everything you need. Now go fight a war.
Right.
You're never by yourself. You always have somebody there.
Yeah.
And I think that was really important because we're taught in the military that our battle, that our left and right person, regardless of race, color, creed, gender, or religion, that's our buddy. That's our battle buddy. That's our
Wingman.
teammate. And
Yep.
absolutely wingman. That's our person. And I think that's one of the most important things because when we come back home, who do we have? We have our family, and that's
Right.
great. But our family hasn't worn those boots in the sand.
Correct.
They haven't held the 19-year-old in your arms, right? So I think that that's one of the most important things that I try to do. Excuse me, that I try to do is try to get to the veteran community and let them explain to them that they're not alone, never alone. You might
Right.
feel alone sometimes, but you're not alone. So it doesn't matter if it's Jesus' birthday, your birthday, or my birthday. Pick up the phone, you call me, and I'm there for you.
Right.
And that I think is what the veteran community is about.
And so many of us have that well, it's that pride, and then that also kind of selfish pride where we can't I don't wanna bother anyone else with my whatever is going on, I
Right,
need to
right.
talk to whatever else. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I wanna hear more about how this podcast of yours just, has exploded, and it's so great for so many veterans out there. Welcome back to Stars of Service. I'm Brian Christensen, joined with Michael Nussbaum, and he is a podcaster, was a army soldier, and we're about to hear how he actually made that leap. Michael.
Thank you again, Brian. It's a very humbling leap, but it's a very interesting to get into podcasting and being on a radio. So I got a phone call from a soldier of mine who we served in Iraq, and he was severely injured in Iraq. And he said, I need somebody to fill a slot for me on a show. Would you be willing to be a guest host? And I said, what am I doing? He said, I'll send you all the equipment. I'll talk you through it. And I teach veterans, and that's what he does. He teaches veterans how to do their own podcast. I said, I'm game. So we did that. And I got a lot of phone calls saying that they want to be back on this show. And then the producer called me one day and he said, would you like your own show? So we came up with a brainstorm.
Sounds familiar.
Better. Yeah. So I came up with Veterans Talk. What's important to you is important to us. So let's talk. And it was a great thing to have veterans and spotlight veterans. I had no idea that the podcast would be shown on Roku television. I had no clue. And
Oh,
I had no
wow.
clue that it would be an actual video. I thought it would just be my voice. And I have a voice for the radio. I don't have a face for TV. So
Oh, whatever. That's a great filter you've got on.
so you're listening to military broadcast radio. So that was my first test, and it was great, and I had a great time. And we started the show, and it was really every day is a learning curve to get content and really push it out there. So
Yes,
my
it
last
is, and I
couple
understand that.
it can be difficult. It can be difficult. And I mean, there's so many things out there, Chat GPT and AI platforms and stuff, but you want to try to keep it original. And that's what
Right.
we do. And my last three series were about relationships, and not just the soldier side or the veteran side, but the family side of dealing with PTSD in relationships and different things in relationships, even childhood trauma and how that affects you in the military and dealing with those two different PTSDs. And it was a great show. It was a 3-part series, and we ended the show great. And it was a really the amount of feedback that I got from the public was really important because that's what it's about. It's really about reaching somebody
Right.
and catering to a whole entire audience, not just one. We're not just looking at veterans. We're looking at the whole as a part because a veteran is just a part of the puzzle, right? We have the families that stood behind, which I personally think is one of the hardest jobs. Here's my checkbook. Here's money for the kids. I love you. I don't know if I'm going to be back. And oh, by the way, when you're lonely and those nights you cry missing me, stay faithful. Don't reach out to nobody. It's probably one of the hardest jobs I think in the military. So I wanted to cater to all of those.
That's a smorgasbord of everything. How in the world, when we have those talks with our family of like, this is our last night together forever. That's nothing is more sobering than that moment. When you began to start your podcast and talk about that very first day, the very first time that you were like, what am I doing? What's going on?
It's hard because I belong to Toastmasters International. So, we always watch the ums and the ands and the and when you watch the news, you pick up on that a lot. So you
Yeah.
try not to do the ums, the ands, and the but it's difficult when you're live and when you're on TV or when you're doing your podcast. It really is. And you have to do takes and takes. Thank goodness
I'm
we have a
laughing at
30-second
myself.
delay. Thank goodness we have the 30-second delay button, as we call it, because sometimes you'll get a guest on there and they'll say something that we try to keep off the air, and you're like, oh, so there's always that. But first time I podcast, Brian, it was, what am I doing? But the feeling that I got afterwards was, and people are going to think I'm crazy and making it up. The feeling I got after getting off the air, and when they say 3, 2, 1, and clear, great show, and the recording is stopped and the on air button is off,
Right. Yeah.
you feel like one or two things, like you just ran a PT marathon, or
Yes.
you were just in a firefight.
Right.
The
That the
adrenaline is
adrenaline.
is
Yes.
yes, it's still the same, and you come down, and it's an adrenaline dump.
Hmm.
I mean, I go and I sit outside somewhere, and whew, it really is. And people think that it just podcast is a bunch of people talking. And it's really not. There's a lot that goes into it.
All of the logistics, the technology, and everything else. It's funny that you're like, oh, I go out on the front deck and have a cup of coffee and relax, and I'm like, they're like, Brian, go to breaking news. Yeah, I don't have that luxury
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. Right.
Um, but especially with so talk about your first phone call or your first message as far as like feedback of like, this is where you're supposed to be.
So the show originated off of Talk PTSD, but I wanted to make it more broader.
Yeah,
So I always had this vision in my head that we, the veteran, are more experienced than any psychiatrist that ever comes before us. And just to share my story, my psychiatrist happens to be on death row right now. So there's a lot of trust issues when it comes to doctors. My psychiatrist with Nidal Hassan, who was the former Army major psychiatrist that shot and killed 12 soldiers in Fort Hood, Texas. So when when you when you have that wall up, you kind of have to take a different approach. So my first show I did was talking about PTSD and opening Pandora's box is what
right.
I called it. And I would rather have a veteran's family member or a loved one or even a veteran talk to me. What works for me might not work for you, but try it. It's just another tool. And I hated one thing I hated was when people would come up to me and go, "Oh, having a bad day, your PTSD. What's going on?" I hated that. It was like for me, it was like being
Yeah,
right. It was like being somebody was putting you in a box,
right.
and I wanted to open that box. So my very first show was about PTSD, and I'll never forget the phone call. Two phone calls back to back. The first phone call was a young lady, and it was a comment actually, and she said, "I'm having a lot of difficulty with my son. He sits in the room, and this is not the son that I raised." And I gave her my phone number. She reached out to me after the show. But in the show, I talked about asking another veteran and seeing what it is that works for them and warning signs. I hate to be
Yeah,
that way, but warning signs. You literally have a key to Pandora's box with me and with other veterans who are on this podcast. Open it up. Ask us the questions. Because one thing I will tell you that will push a veteran away farther than anything is when you ask them about their experience or PTSD. And for me, it was healing to be able to tell my experiences and
right.
what I had went through. So, and then the other one was a 70-year-old man who had literally served in Vietnam and had never talked about his experience. One day, a friend had mentioned my podcast about PTSD, and he jumped on it and listened to it. And he called me after the show and began crying. And he said, "I've never talked about my experience." And that for me was again that brick. It might be just a little brick of the foundation that holds that building together, that I'm actually reaching one veteran, and you never know. And it's so true that don't give in to the fight within. And you know what
Yeah,
that is, Brian.
yeah.
And it's we have to look out for each other. We don't go to battle alone. We always have a battle buddy or a wingman or somebody that's next to us. And I wanted to be that person. So the very first podcast was very challenging for me. And afterwards, I think I did a lot of self reflecting.
I can, yes, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about too. Um, tell you what, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about how you and I actually met. Welcome back to Stars of Service. I'm Brian Christensen. Today I'm joined by Michael Nussbaum, who's also a Army veteran and also a podcaster based out of Salisbury, North Carolina. We actually met one evening at a bowling alley. I was shooting a story, and he just happened to be, um, I guess, in the same lane, talking with the person that we were interviewing. Um, and you were just super friendly. He came up to us and just, kind of opened up, and it was like, okay, I'm being drawn to this person. I don't know why. And it was because, we served around the same amount of time, maybe not the same location, but then to find out that once we started talking, wait, you're from Miami, Florida also? And didn't know you back then, of course, but um, talk a little bit about that veteran bowling league that you're a part of.
So it's really neat. It's a veteran bowling league that meets every Monday in Salisbury, North Carolina, and a lot of it is donated by the actual bowling alley. So the fees are a lot of the fees are waived or discounted, and it's a mixture of veterans. A lot of veterans that are Vietnam era, and one of the veterans that was there who is confined in the wheelchair is a Air Force veteran, and you being Air Force was really neat. And again, like you said, we just started talking, you and I, and found out that we grew up in the same places with high school, so it was really neat. Here we were across the world, and I think that's one of the things that connects a lot of veterans is you spend time together. There's a lot of commonalities, if you will.
Right.
And I thought that was really neat. But the bowling league is wonderful. It's really great. It's a great time for a bunch of veterans to get together, kind of pick on each other and have fun. And you know, I uh, I have a bet with the gentleman that you interviewed, and the bet was is that every time he gets a strike, I yell "Go Air Force" every time I get when he says "Go Army." So it was kind of a bitter
I heard that a
rivalry,
few
but it was great.
times. I heard
Yeah.
a few times that night. Um, how did you get involved with that? I mean, okay, and when do you actually have free time, by the way?
So a lot of volunteering, a lot of volunteering. I met a gentleman at a breakfast. We went to breakfast, and we met this gentleman. He had a army engineer hat on, so automatically I was drawn to him. And he said, "Oh, I served in the Marine Corps, but I stole one of your hats because I was an engineer in the Marine Corps." And we had a great talk, and he said, "Are you new here?" And I said, "I'm fairly new." And he said, "Well, we have a bowling league if you bowl." And I have. I've been bowling since I was 7
Oh,
in
wow.
different leagues, bowled in the Army. And I said, "Yes, I would love to bowl." And he says, "Well, I also teach bowling." And he was an older gentleman, Vietnam veteran. And that was how we got involved. And I reached out to him. He said, "I got a league starting up. Would you love to join it?" And I said, "Sure." So I jumped on his actual team, and we bowl every Monday. It was great. It was really neat. A great connection. And as far as the time, it's kind of my downtime. It's where I find my peace.
Hmm. It's funny because when I saw you guys there, I mean, it looked like you guys were truly at work together for each other. And I was a little jealous. I mean, Salisbury is a solid hour from me. Like, man, if I was a little had a little bit more time, whatever, that would be amazing. Though I should try to see if there's something like that in my neck of the woods. What is talk about just that camaraderie, that brotherhood, sisterhood too, that you all have.
I think that's one of the biggest things and misconcepts that people don't realize is that in the military, we have an initiation, if you will, kind of like a fraternity does, right?
Right.
Or a Masonic lodge or the Knights of Columbus or whatever it be it. It's an initiation, and we all go through that initiation. It doesn't matter what branch of the service you're in, you go through that initiation. Some of them are harder than the others. We'll admit that just that way. But nonetheless, it's still the same initiation. We
Right.
still do the push-ups, the PT, we get up early in the morning, we do things that we normally wouldn't want to do. And that initiation process is called basic training.
Correct.
And when we graduate basic training, we are now in the fraternity, the sorority. We are together as one. And that's a camaraderie. It's the same way as when you meet somebody who you went to high school with, but we're closer because we all cry together, we sweat together,
Yeah.
we argue together, and we find a
Yes.
commonality of a solution together. And that's what it's about. So I honestly could say that I'm closer with some of the people that I went into the military with and served with than I am with my own family members. And
With
that
those life and death
camaraderie,
situations, absolutely.
absolutely, and that camaraderie never leaves us. It
Right.
never leaves us. You can literally see somebody across a Waffle House or a breakfast wearing a military hat, and it could be from a different branch of service.
Yes.
And we look over and we catch a smile, catch a
Yep.
glimpse because we know. And I've done it before. I pay usually all the time when I see an older veteran or a veteran with a hat on sitting by themselves. I'll pay for their meal. Doesn't matter
That's
where it's
awesome.
at. And the first thing they always say is, "You served too, didn't you?" They know. It's just we know. And it's a camaraderie, and that's what I got out of the bowling was it's a camaraderie. It's not about who's winning and who's beating. There's no real competition there. We high five each other. We say, "All right, you got this. Pick it
Good.
up."
Yeah.
And just like the military, they get frustrated too. We get frustrated. I get frustrated. You got this. Don't worry about it. And it's that little push.
Michael, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and talking about what you're doing now, what you've done, helping others. Um, I've got to ask one thing though. We've got 30 seconds. If you can do this quick. Your DJ name is Magic Mike. How'd you get that name?
So way before the movie ever came out with Channing Tatum, I was in the military, and every time that I would hear the lieutenant or an officer talking about they couldn't do something or they couldn't find something, I would disappear and I would reappear with it, whether it was a Humvee top, whether it was a screwdriver that was missing or whatever.
That's
So
awesome.
my first name being Michael, they were like, "Oh, that's Magic Man. He's Magic Mike." So it kind of stuck with me. Obviously, I get a lot of kickback. No, I do not dance like him, but I get a lot of kickbacks because of the name. But yeah, it just kind of stuck.
That's fantastic. Michael, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on, and let's do this again sometime. And I want to talk a little bit more about, about those dark days, about the energy you can get just by taking one step after another, and just getting the breakthrough into the next to the next level for yourself. But I truly appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Brian, for having me. And Brian, thank you for your service as well.
Thank you. You've been watching Stars of Service. Thank you so much for watching.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.